Our sponsors for the Agronomists are Nutrien eKonomics, the Soil School, and FMC Pre-School. FMC Pre-School is a product-agnostic program designed to equip growers and agricultural professionals with the latest tools and insights for effective weed management. From herbicide science to resistance trends, we're here to help you grow smarter. Learn more at fmcpreschool.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and I am super excited for tonight's conversation. We did it. We saved the daylight. No, I don't think we did. Either way, I almost had to have a nap this afternoon because apparently an hour time change is difficult on not just livestock and babies, but also your host, Lyndsey Smith. Okay, a quick reminder. realagriculture.com/agronomists. Go there tomorrow. Make sure you let us know that you watch the show. Get those CEU credits. Everybody needs them. Everybody wants them. Go and check it out. And while you're there, of course, sign up for our agronomist email. All it does is let you know what topic is coming up, when we're going live, and we'll send you a reminder of the link to go and watch it and get those CEU credits. So it is free. Go and do it. Okay. All right. We are going to have a fantastic conversation this evening all about soil dynamics, soil structure, and why sometimes, this is the question I'm going to ask, why sometimes soil goes hard as a brick. to have that conversation, we have with us tonight Jodi DeJong, like the old, but DeJong-Hughes with the University of Minnesota, and Laura Van Eerd with the University of Guelph. Welcome here, Jodi. Welcome here, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's start with, for those who aren't familiar with the programs that the two of you work with, Jodi, we'll start with you. Tell us about the research that you do and your role.
Well, I've worked for the University of Minnesota Extension for 28 years and have worked mainly on soil erosion, tillage, compaction, mainly in a corn soybean situation, also with sugar beets. So, yeah, and I don't know how I fell into all this. It was actually just pretty cool stuff. I also want to apologize for being a USer right now. So,
Okay,
just
Jodi. That is very heartfelt, and we
sorry.
appreciate it. Yeah, we love our American friends. Things aren't great.
Yeah,
We'll be honest. Yeah,
yeah.
so thank you for that. It is well received, and you are welcome here anytime. All right, Laura, what is keeping you busy at the University of Guelph?
Yeah, so lots of things it seems like. We've got some 4R nitrogen management with and without cover crops, trying to optimize the system there. So after winter wheat and then going into corn, we have, of course, my long-term cover crop experiment that I've been chatting about more recently, and a soil health project that kind of we're going to ground truth SHAP. So we're inviting growers to bring farmers to send in samples for soil health testing.
Which, for everyone, stick around near the end of the program. We do have a QR code to follow to potentially get some soil testing done. Get that SHAP, the soil health assessment. Is that what it is? What does it stand for, Laura?
Yeah, soil health assessment and plan brought to you
Okay.
by OMAFA.
Okay. OMAFA. Somewhere in Middle America. Okay, OMAFA. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so tonight's conversation, a favorite of mine. Anytime we can talk soil and soil dynamics, I am a happy camper. So, am super excited about this. But Jodi, maybe I'll start with you. I know, we've had you on the show before. We've certainly had you on Real Agriculture before, talking about the compaction question. And we're definitely going to talk about compaction tonight, but we're going to talk a whole bunch of other things. So let's start maybe with perhaps the most likely reason I could be dealing with hard as a brick soils, and it may be compaction, but it might not be. Walk us through sort of how we start to evaluate these things.
Well, I would think it's mainly a loss of aggregation or soil structure. Uh, those little aggregates in the soil, when they're soil compaction and soil health are intimately combined as well. So you have those little aggregates and they kind of act as a natural way to hold up the weight of equipment as you're driving across. And as you do more tillage, it just breaks them apart into smaller and smaller particles. Now you don't have the airspace and it turns into a brick.
Mm-hmm. Laura, are there chemical reasons we could end up with soil that's hard as a brick? Or
Did you
is it not that
did you say
simple?
chemical reasons?
Yeah. Like, are we worried about just the structure, or are there like other things like organic matter or
Yeah,
way crazy
yeah.
imbalances, those sorts of things that could play a role here?
I think you're helping to move the conversation along, and Jodi is absolutely right. We need those aggregates, and what's the glue to keep those aggregates together? It's the organic matter, and so you're just connecting the dots for us. And absolutely, I would say organic matter is one of the the things that hold it together. Yeah. And,
Okay.
it's more forgiving. The more organic matter you have, the more forgiving the soil is to any time you have to go when it's too wet, or anytime you're on the land when oh, I really wish I wasn't, but I have to. And we know that happens, right? Um, yep. So you got it, organic matter.
Mm-hmm. So
And that too is tied directly to soil health and compaction and tillage and cover crops. It's amazing, the same answer, or you get the same answer for a lot of different problems in soils.
Mm-hmm. So corn and beans obviously very common. When I think sugar beets, Jodi, I think pretty high disturbance. So I depending on the different kinds of crops that you're growing, you've got a different set of risk factors per se. How does someone in a high disturbance system like something with sugar beets, how do you manage for something like soil aggregate stability?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out too. Any of the root crops can be very tough on the soil because you have to dig them out to, get your crop, your harvest. So we're looking at can you get in cover crops anytime during the season with sugar beets, and their season is so long and they never die to let sunlight hit the ground. They're just really tough to get a cover crop into. But what I have found is that you could do strip till or leave standing stalks in the corn the year before, then go to your sugar beets, and those stalks can help kind of play the same role. You don't have the living roots, which is, that's the greatest thing about cover crops, but it does help with wind protection, and then it helps with actually some trafficability later when you need to get in there and harvest the plants.
Mm-hmm. OP.
So there's not a good answer. Oh, and I would also say that if you can't do it in the sugar beet year, then really do it in the other 2 years.
Right.
It's not a 1 year ruins everything. It's it's a
Right.
building of things. 2 steps forward, 1 step back if you need to.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think about that a few ways. One year doesn't ruin everything, but 1 year doesn't fix everything, right? So we have to think about the whole rotation of everything that goes into that, and at what time of year, and those sorts of things. So Peter brings up a question that I think has been on his mind that he wants to talk about, and one of the things we are definitely going to talk about is water infiltration. But Peter wants to know why, once water sits in a low spot, that water just never seems to infiltrate properly again until you do something about it. Now, in what you do about it, there's probably 100 different directions we could go with that. But I guess we could explore why water sits in that low spot. But is this where wet begets wet? Who wants to tackle that one first?
I'll start, and then Jodi, please
Go ahead,
add
Laura.
to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is the water table, right? And the water table is we have tiles in our land to bring that water table down, and the low spot is just the lowest spot. So that's where the water's going to stay until it drains, which I know that's pretty simple and basic. And then you would add on to that. That's also where the clay and silt tends to accumulate, right? The sand stays up on the knoll. And so now you've got these sand and silt particles. Because they're in water, those aggregates tend to break down. And so now we're back to the beginning of the conversation that Jodi said, right? You need those aggregates to keep the air in, and it also allows the water to move through. And you've seen it in those low areas, right? You walk by it afterwards and you can see that little crusting that happens on the surface. And then water infiltration is even worse there.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
Can we
part of it.
I liked how you explained that. Yes, that I really like that. The other thing is since it is wetter, when you're doing your field work, you're driving through it wetter, and you're also creating more compaction too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you want to show there's a slide, it might be the first one of the soil profiles.
Yes,
perfect.
Let's do that. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, so the one on the left is at the top of a hill. And we're not talking a very steep slope, maybe 3%. It's not one that you shouldn't be farming. And the other one on the right-hand side is at the bottom of the hill. Now you have that soil that's moving from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill, and tillage speeds up this process. And so it takes a while to build your soil structure, right? Those aggregates, and maybe you're doing everything right. But as that soil keeps coming down the hill on top of there, it's coming down with no structure. Little aggregates don't roll down the hill. It's those little individual particles that will either blow or move with water or the tillage implement. And so it just takes a long time for them to get their structure built back up. But if you look at this, you could see that the top 60 centimeters is black topsoil down at the bottom of the hill, and you're totally missing it from the top of the hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this photo, Jodi. We have something similar, and it's on our sandy soil, and I'm in Chatham, Kent. It's flat, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you see the exact same thing. Go to the top, sample. Very, very similar. I wouldn't say we're that deep in terms of, or that dark in terms of organic matter, but exactly the same thing.
Yeah, same idea. Okay, so and Jason wants to talk about porosity, which we can as well. But Mark says we soil sample after wheat every year and have quite a stack of broken or bent soil probes. Some years we have to drill the samples in certain spots. I love that, Mark. Adapt, innovate, overcome. But for something like that, so especially if you know that you've got a compaction layer or perhaps a very large compaction layer, Laura, how would you start to address that as far as, over time, what you could be doing to improve your soil aggregates and your soil aggregate stability?
Okay. So immediately my mind goes to get a different type of probe. Get one of
Spend
those.
more money on your probe, Mark.
Get a Dutch auger or
Dutch auger. Okay. Yeah.
Get the one that you could twist that will go 15 centimeter. But that's yeah.
It's a good start.
So I got the smart comment out, and that's as far as I went.
Yeah.
But yeah, time of year and moisture, of course, we know. Yeah, is it a heavy clay, I imagine, or is it just a compacted layer?
Right. So
Yeah,
and I guess Jodi, like I guess to me there's several questions you almost need to ask to follow up to that, right? Is where in the field, what kind of soil, field history, etc. So what are those? Maybe walk us through that sort of thought process of going through how that compaction layer or how big it is. How important is it even to identify it and know how deep down it is or how big it is?
Okay, well, okay, so aggregates are your number one defense against soil compaction. Tillage breaks up aggregates. The more aggressive you are, the deeper you go, the more often you're out there, the more you're going to be breaking that up and turning it into little fine particles. So if you need to find that layer that the compaction is at, say, and I'm sorry, in the inches, 8 inches, what would that be again?
Okay.
20 centimeters. I'll get there. I'll get there. I promise.
Okay, we can do it.
I am so amazed how bilingual you guys are with numbers and this and all that. So
because we can't, it's because we can't decide which one to use, so we just use them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So a lot of the subsoilers are made at 20 inches. Now, if you only have an 8-inch issue and you take in a 20-inch shank to tear through that compacted layer, now you're setting yourself up for even deeper compaction, because that 20-inch shank is now breaking up even more of those little aggregates and making it's going to turn into a brick right where you go with the subsoiler. The other thing about subsoilers is make sure that they're a straight leg shank and not parabolic or twisted, because you don't want to bring any of that soil up from 20 inches deep. You saw on that profile that you'll just be bringing up the tan stuff, which is not, it doesn't have the organic matter in it, doesn't have the nutrients, doesn't have anything that you really want to be up at the surface. Now, to also help the soil to get better, again, it's improving soil health. And what we want is that you want more biomass. To be able to get more carbon to make more organic matter, you need more and more biomass. So when farmers say, oh, you just don't want us to get good yields, it's like, no, that's not true. You wouldn't build carbon if you didn't get good yields, right? You need that biomass. And sometimes to get that biomass, you're going to need to go through with that subsoiler. But find out where it is, because it's probably more in the low-lying areas where it's been wetter and you've been driving on it when it's a little bit wetter. And then be more prescriptive about where you go out with the subsoiler, because you can always do more subsoiling. It's really hard to undo tillage.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd add
understatement of the night. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I just add that we, you wouldn't till when it was too wet, but how do you know how wet it is, that 20 inches where the subsoiler is going? Like, have you took your shovel out and checked? Then that's the part that I worry about with the subsoilers, is just, is it too wet down at that depth to be subsoiling?
Yeah.
Then you're going to be smearing and lots of other things.
And that's a whole other set of problems you're looking at there.
Right. And I've also, I suppose I see where, and we've had this conversation on the show many times, where, the strategic use of something like a deep ripper, a subsoiler, those sorts of things of but a really good point. I never thought about the difference in the like moisture at depth could actually still be far too wet down below, potentially. Yes. Okay. So we've got a good question about, oh, go ahead, Jodi.
The fuel use is
Yes,
phenomenally
absolutely.
higher as you go deeper into the soil.
Yeah, it is. And that's a huge thing. It's not just our time and wear and tear. It is a lot of diesel to pull those things through the field. Absolutely. Okay, so we've got some questions about calcium and magnesium that we will get to in a minute. But I want to throw to, and Trevor's got some great things he wants to share about disasters. We love those. We learn from our mistakes, everybody. Test plots. But I want to go to our clip. This is with producer Jay, if you would. It's using radish in cropping systems, because we've got some really great video that sort of shows just how far down some of these roots go and which roots are doing the work of potentially helping to break up some compaction lower down. So producer Jay, if you would, we'll go to our clip on radish in cropping systems with Yvonne and Lolly.
And we think about some of the different tillage tools that we have to alleviate soil compaction. Plants do the same thing, but in a very different way. And it's important to understand that mechanism to be able to use them effectively to reach that target goal for cover crops. So radishes are a cover crop that are being sold specifically for compaction alleviation. You see that in a lot of the names that are given to radish cover crops. And with radish cover crops, we often think about this big radish root here. This is, I would say, a moderately sized one here, about 1.5 inches in diameter. But they can grow, as large as my forearm here. And you often see pictures of people growing gigantic radishes. But it's not that part of the radish root that's doing the really hard work of alleviating soil compaction. In fact, here we have a soil here at Portage that actually has a fairly substantial root restricting layer here, about 2 inches deep for about a good 10 inches. And here we see that the roots of this radish are growing along the ped faces and the planes, cracks in between soil here in this soil. And it's these fine root hairs that are actually the mechanism or the means that plants can be used to alleviate soil compaction. So it's a two-step process. One is growing roots that can push through this root restricting layer, and we call this biodrilling. And then when those roots decompose or die and decompose, they leave channels behind. And those channels are what subsequent crops that you grow like wheat or canola or corn and soybeans, can access to grow through a root restricting layer.
The Agronomist is made possible by the Soil School, FMC Pre-School, and Nutrien eKonomics. Find the answer for today's ag challenges on The Dirt. Brought to you by eKonomics, The Dirt provides expert conversations on nutrient management, markets, weather, and current trends shaping agriculture. Join Mike Howell for Season 4 as he digs into new insights, new guests, and new topics that will help you make better decisions on your farm. Listen to The Dirt on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or visit Nutrien eKonomics. That's Nutrien-eKonomics with a K.com. All right. Radish fixes everything, right, Laura? Does it fix everything? Or no?
Roots. I would say roots do, right? Whether it's a cereal, whether it's a cover crop. And I think having more frequent roots in the rotations, living roots, they're the ones, I like that term, bio-drilling, that are creating channels, creating pores, right? Those macro pores, which is what water flows through, air flows through, and what's destroyed through tillage, right? You break up those macro pores. Yeah. And just like people, right? We roots choose the path of least resistance. And so keeping, right, if you have a cover crop in the fall and into the spring and then terminate, then your crop roots can access more volume of soil and deeper soil. And I think that's the key, right? Access water, access nutrients.
Yeah.
And I think
yeah, go ahead, Jodi.
that the one with the water infiltration, those two
Yes,
pictures.
yeah. That's where, yeah, Producer Jay, if you could, I think it's slide 3. Slide 3, I think, is where we want to start. Because, and,
No, the one right before.
Yeah, the one right before. Sorry, Jay. So Jason had a question earlier about porosity, and which really is a discussion on water infiltration. And we've got a lot of questions in here about different, potentially some additions we could be adding, some amendments, maybe some fertility questions. But first, Jodi, walk us through what we're looking at here as far as infiltration, what we really mean when we're talking about that.
I'm not sure if you've seen the rainfall simulator. We've done a lot in Minnesota and surrounding states. This is from UNL, or University of Nebraska. What I like that they did a little differently than what we do here is, so on the very right is a cover crop field. And then the one next to it is one with long-term no-till. The middle one is zero residue out there and tillage. The next one to the left is about, it wasn't quite a 50% cover of residue, and it was just laid on top. It wasn't, standing stalks or anything. And then the one next to that is 100% residue cover. So the three on the left to me is very interesting. I don't see that very often, that they use these as comparisons. And you can see from the little buckets, that's what infiltrated into these soils with the inch rain. And you can see that there was a lot of infiltration towards the right with the residue that was in there, but it's still a little muddy. So, it's doing okay, but you can see where the roots are really cleaning that water, and there's a lot of infiltration into that soil. Now on the next slide, it shows those three from the left, the ones with different levels of residue. And when you take that pan after you rained on it and you flip it over and bang it on the ground, to me, that's the most telling. So if you could go to the next slide, that'd be awesome. Okay, so it's backwards here, but the one on the very left is the 0% residue. And then the middle one is the about 50% residue, and the other one is 100% residue. And you can see that, how much there's a little bit more water going through the system, the more residue that you have. And it's mainly because you stop the rain from pounding the soil and turning the top like a brick, crusting that soil, and then that water can't get in. And so the residue and any living cover crops I don't care if it's dead or alive, it helps get that water into the soil. But living has some really great benefits to it. Oh,
So
actually,
this,
those are the three from the right side. Oh,
yeah,
I
I was
gave you
going to
the
say, I
wrong
think it's
ones.
that's okay. I think, well, we've got the middle to compare to the far right, which is the cover crop, I think. And it
Yes,
is. I mean, it's bone dry, the one in the middle
Yeah.
that doesn't have the residue, which means the water just
right.
rolled right off the surface and away it went. To me, though, this is really an important part of the thought process in thinking about our spring and our fall, and just how important it is get that crop up and growing in the spring, and how much that protects us from those spring storms or summer big rainfall events, like the role that plants play in slowing down rainfall for one thing, but then also of course having those root systems growing. So to me, this really speaks to, when our soil is vulnerable in the spring and in the fall to runoff, and or that is also infiltration that doesn't happen, that we might need or we might want. We may want to work hang on to some of that soil or some of that rainfall in a dry year. um, Laura, I mean, you work with, you said yes, very flat ground, but you work with some really interesting crops that obviously water retention is also a huge part of this equation. So when you see something like this, like what goes through your mind as far as trying to figure out how we add some of this principle back into our cropping systems?
Yeah, I just think they're awesome demonstrations. And like when I think about it, when I see that clear water, I think people like that's just a little bit that's gone through, probably just on the edge, right? It hasn't gone through the soil. It's just at the edge of that platform that's there. Uh, and so then I'm thinking about our tiles and what color the effluent or what color the water is coming through our tiles, right? Because this is what the infiltration is trying to show. Now that's 3 feet deep, but anytime it's got soil, right? Is it muddy? That's erosion. And we often don't think of erosion through the tile, but it's soil particles going through the tile, getting washed down. And then I think about, I really want to analyze that water and see what is the nutrients in it, the soil particles, but also like that dissolved carbon. I've been thinking a little bit more about, how does carbon get to depth, and is it dissolved carbon moving out through our tiles too? Yeah, lots of neat demonstrations there.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
so yeah.
there's a good question here, about that sort of harkens back to our bio drilling and thinking about our roots that are going to move through our soil profile and try and find that path of least resistance. Does it need to be a radish? Laura, maybe I'll ask you this question. Because I know, and actually in that clip, Yvonne says, we attribute names to these radishes that, give them action like tillage, etc. But does it have to be a radish? Is an oat cover crop just as good? You know, because we do get very complicated sometimes with our cover crops, and I don't know that we need to. So, do we have to have a radish in the mix to achieve some of this, Laura?
I think not. It's just having something growing is right. It's so to me, I'm not going to split hairs as to what or how many in the mix, right? I think in terms of alleviating compaction, yeah, they're marketed as that, but what yeah, it's just having a plant growing, right? Um,
And you
and
got to be
maybe a
careful if you're going to
taproot.
grow. Oh, I'm sorry, Laura. I was going to say if you're
No,
growing a brassica crop,
yeah,
Right.
you don't want to have the tillage or the radish ahead of time.
That's
yeah,
right.
Not
Yeah.
exactly.
fully all by itself, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Red
Exactly.
clover is nice, right, for that
Yep.
purpose.
Okay.
Like
Fixes everything too.
I wouldn't encourage someone to get rid of it. And I would never recommend a radish on its own. I think radish behaves better. Well, your neighbors will be happier with you if you don't plant an entire field of stinky radishes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the nice radish pea oat, or just radish and oat. Yeah.
Yeah. It does. Okay. Good point about not an entire field of radish. It hang out there in like November, guys. It doesn't smell great. But Jodi, really great point. Certainly for those areas that perhaps are growing canola, or if you're concerned about some of the diseases, those sorts of things. I mean, it is a brassica. We don't necessarily want to be adding brassicas into the rotation if we're trying to rotate away from them. So that is really important. Mark does say that when I see the radishes getting big, it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. So Laura, to your point though, we want a
Agree.
vibrant, growing cover crop, right? So if tillage radish or radishes do well, nothing wrong with them in the mix, but I don't know that we can say that they're going to solve all of our problems. Also, I really like that radish that we see, at the surface does look very impressive. But I really appreciate Yvonne's point about it's those little hairs, root hairs down below that really are sort of forging the path for the next crop that you grow there. Jodi, I want to ask you, there are some questions here about different soil amendments and or nutrients we could be adding to our soil potentially to try and alleviate some of our issues. How do we navigate that question? Because I feel like that could get very complicated very quickly.
No, it can get me in trouble very quickly. In our state and the surrounding states, the biological products have not been working right now. We have very high organic matter levels, and we have the microbes there. If you give them a home, they will start working for you. Then there's other products that they, my favorite product, if you want to add something, is manure. I mean, it has everything in it that you need. It has carbon, it has lots of the other nutrients. It's good stuff. And I would go that route first before trying other ones. Now I know not everybody's near animals and they can't get manure out on their field. I do get that. But if there is somebody near you, it is an excellent source for microbes. So what would you say, Laura, about products?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking that way, which is probably self-preservation. But I guess I was kind of prepared for that gypsum kind of question. And that's really, like they say, oh, gypsum for soil aggregates and structure. But that's on those salt soils, those sodic soils that have lots of sodium. And when that calcium replaces the sodium, then you get better soil aggregates. But it's not an issue here in Ontario. It could be out on the prairies, or maybe if you have a contaminated well site where you've got lots of sodium, or by the road where you have lots of maybe salt, then look to gypsum. But other than that, it's not. It doesn't work that way.
It's right. Gypsum is also for, like you said, sodic soils, not for saline soils. Those are two different types of soils, and you need to do a soil test to figure out which one you have. And most people, it's saline. The other thing that you need if you want gypsum to be able to move that calcium, or, when calcium knocks off the bad stuff off of the soil, and you need to have rain wash it through. Otherwise, it's still there and it can still rejoin onto the soil. So we do have a couple little sodic spots around here. There are people that use gypsum and they say that they see better yields. And I would probably say it's the sulfur in gypsum that's working, especially in the corn, more so than gypsum. because
Right.
it's calcium sulfate, so it has your sulfur in it.
Yep.
If you have a free source of it, sure, go ahead and put it out there, but I wouldn't expect it to create aggregation in your soil, because that's what they're saying is calcium makes things flock together. So you would have, and yeah, there's some things that work in a lab that don't work the same way out in the field.
That's right. If there's one thing we have talked about on the show many times, it's that soil is very complex, and also that microbes are opportunists, and therefore, trying to add something to soil at even a small amount when we're talking biology can be really difficult to try and move the needle on changing a population. But that is definitely a conversation. Is from the nutrient perspective, is there something we could be adding to potentially change how the soil the soil aggregate stability works? I don't know that, Jodi, your answer of manure, or if we're talking about exactly that, adding biomass to build our organic matter, build our carbon. The unfortunate thing for both of you is that that is a longer term commitment. And unfortunately, we have to pay bills every year. And sometimes it seems like the better solution to do a tillage pass or do a deep rip or do those sorts of things. So, Jodi, how do I get in the mindset of the longer term addressing some of these water filtration challenges?
If you reduce tillage and keep some standing stocks out there, you should see better water infiltration right away, especially if you go to strip till or like no-till beans. Our soybeans are really quite adaptable, to be no-till. And that will help. At least I have 20 years of tillage data that shows that reducing your tillage does not reduce your yield. Unless you're in no-till and you're in continuous corn, that can definitely hurt your yield, depending on the year. So now I lost my train of thought because I'm old.
So,
No,
no, you're
that's
DeYoung.
good.
You even said it's the
I'm
opposite.
DeYoung. I just start calling me
DeYoung.
Jodi DeOld from now
Yeah,
on. I'll
no,
be
absolutely
fine.
not. Okay, well, so the question
Let Laura
that,
answer.
so Laura, yeah, we could go to Laura. That often exactly that we are in a system, we manage our fields a certain way. And as Jodi points out, we can talk about reducing tillage, not eliminating tillage, just reducing it, or reducing our passes when the field isn't optimal, or changing our tire pressure. Like, how do we put together all the pieces that put the soil aggregate first as far as our goals go?
Yeah. And I think a lot of farmers are doing it, right? Like they are putting the pieces together. And I think it's with purpose, right? What is the tillage? How are you doing it? And with purpose, right? Yeah. And that system with continuous corn, that can be challenging. And then you have a lot of residue. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I just kind of think, can you reduce the a pass or the intensity of disturbance, and then keep in mind that that every time you have bare soil, it's subjected to losses, right? And the more recently I saw a nice analogy would be like a dime's width of any resource. Would you let anyone steal a dime's worth of your topsoil? Like your topsoil has the most nutrients, the most organic matter, and you're just putting it out there, susceptible to water, wind, I don't know. I know a lot of people that would hold on to a physical dime, let alone a dime's width of soil just gone. And
That's
that's
right.
like tons,
Especially
right?
especially an American dime, it's worth a fortune right now. Okay, so good point though, Laura. So thinking about bare soil, reducing a pass, reducing intensity. It's not an all or nothing, which I think is a really good point. Um,
Mhm.
Jodi, you sent producer Jay. If you can go to, it looks like an alien jar. I think it's slide. I don't know, it might be slide 5. This one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What am I looking at, and why does it look like it might be a drum set? I'm not really sure. So what
Yeah,
is
really.
this?
It's
Yeah.
soil cores that they did a CT scan on. And actually,
Cool.
CT scanners are getting to be more and more, they're showing up in the soil labs now, which is kind of fun. What it is showing is a 3D version of the pore space in these two soils. And the soil on the left, you can see the pores are the white parts, the pores. They're longer, they're more continuous. If it rained on that soil, you could see it could get into the soil very quickly. There's the large pores to bring that water down. There's the smaller pores to hold on to things. And then the one on the right, it was actually compacted 29 or 27 years before this was taken. And it's still compacted. So you could tell that there's not the continuous pore spaces. If it rained on there, you could have more ponding. You do have some pores to help take that water down, but not a lot. So we think that freeze thaw, I think everybody who listens to the show is in a zone that has freeze thaw. That takes care of compaction. Well, I think it did when we had only 5-ton and axle load vehicles out there, equipment out there, and that we weren't down to 2 crops. We had alfalfa in rotation or pasture in rotation because we had animals and we had manure to go back onto the field. So you weren't compacting that deep. And freeze thaw, you need like 12 freeze thaw cycles before it really helps break it up. And a lot of times we don't get that. But more so in the surface. So I say more like for top 2 to 5 inches. It can help mellow out those cloddy soils after you go till. But depending on the winter, sometimes that doesn't even happen. And our compaction can go 3 to 4 feet down into the soil, and you're lucky if you get one freeze thaw at that level. So the deeper the compaction, the longer it stays. Oh, and I think Laura, you got that graph.
Yes.
Mhm.
I want to come back to
Yeah.
this one, but yes, producer Jay, let's go to Laura's graph, the slide 1. And then I want to come back to this because I have a few more questions. But this is a fantastic one as well. So Laura, walk me through this one.
Yes. So on the bottom, we have time. And I purposely kind of hid the actual numbers that go with time because I want the audience to kind of guess what are those tick marks? Is it
Oh.
1 year, 2 year, 5,
5.
10,
Okay.
15,
All right.
29, which is what
Okay.
Jodi said, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
it's not surprising that there's yield losses, 15% yield loss at time 0 when you have a compaction event. And that yield loss lasts longer if you compact the subsoil. That makes total sense. And the lower, your soil's compacted, harder it is to fix. I guess maybe in the chat you can guess what's the
Everybody
number
guess.
that goes here at this first tick.
What? Yeah,
That's
the number at
between
the bottom.
time. Yeah, at the bottom.
Okay.
What do people think?
So yeah, what does everybody think? Are we thinking it's a year, 5 year, 10 year, 2 years? I'm gonna put out there that those tick marks are 10 years. That's my guess. And I haven't seen this, so I'm not cheating.
Mhm.
Anybody else, put your thoughts in there. This
Yep.
is yeah, okay. So
What is it?
everybody want to guess?
It's,
No.
I can tell
I don't
you.
Okay, what is it? You tell her.
It's
It'll come in.
it's
It's just yeah, there we go. 5 years per
yep.
tick says.
It
Okay,
is.
I
You
said
got
5.
it, Larry. Right on.
Oh, Way to go,
It's
Larry.
5
You get a
years per
gold
tick.
star. Okay. Oh,
So, right. So at 5 years after one compaction event, you're still at, 5%, over 5% yield loss. So
wow.
it,
Okay.
and then that next tick is another 10, 5 years, 5 years.
5 years. Okay.
So
So can we go, Producer Jay? Actually, pause. We have to do our last read of the night. So if Producer Jay, if you would do that, and when we come back, I want to go back to the CT scan porosity, because there's a few questions that came up that relate to that I want to relate this all back to. So Producer Jay, if you would, we'll go to our last read of the night. The Agronomist is brought to you by FMC Pre-School, Nutrien eKonomics, and the Soil School. Soil health directly impacts crop health, which directly impacts your bottom line. Real Agriculture Soil School provides an opportunity for farmers to learn how to improve soil through discussions on the use of cover crops, strip till and no-till, compost, manure, and more. The Soil School is made possible by support from the Mosaic Company. Visit realagriculture.com/soil-school or our YouTube channel for all episodes. All right. So with the time we have left, okay. So Peter makes the comment about topsoil compaction versus deeper compaction, and that obviously in the topsoil, Jodi, as you said, in those first few inches, we may have several freeze thaw cycles, but of course, the further down we go, we may get one, we may get none, depending on the kind of winter that you've got. I would imagine soil type and moisture also play a role in just how much, actual movement or cracking. Not all soils crack, some do. So that would play a role as well. But ultimately, if you have compaction, Mother Nature is not going to fix it for you. There is a question. Do earthworms help with this, Jodi? Will an earthworm make a macropore that I could count on?
Yes, very much. Those macropores, just to let you know how important they are, they maybe make up 1% of the soil out there, but they will conduct about 70% of the moisture, the water. So you want these macropores out there. And if you look at these, I'm kind of looking at them going, some of them actually look like earthworm channels as well as root channels. And the roots will take old earthworm channels. So earthworms are highly important in these systems, and they don't like tillage because earthworms, they make a tunnel all the way to the surface. And take that one on the left, let's say some of those are earthworm channels. If you did tillage and you knocked off all that top half, it's very difficult for them it takes a lot of energy to make a new channel. Also, if they're up towards the surface when you're doing the tillage, you're flipping them up into the air and on the surface. And if you see a bunch of seagulls following your tractor,
Mhm.
you're just feeding them this huge smorgasbord of earthworms and other insects. So, but earthworms, yes, are very critical to helping. They also move soil up and down and nutrients up and down, so you don't get as much striation. What am I trying to say?
yeah,
Layers.
stratification. Yep.
Stratification.
Yes,
There
We knew.
layers. I have to ask, where in the heck do those gulls come from? I swear I will never see a gull, and then you start working a field and it's like the birds. I don't understand. So if somebody could tell me
It's
where they're
true.
hiding, right? And who puts the
Because
call out? Like, who is like, guys, there's tillage happening.
I don't even see them in the trees around here. I mean,
No.
it's just all
And then they
cropland and
just
it's
appear.
flat.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
terrifying. Okay, Laura, when we look at these, what is the importance of that these pores connect? Because I think about if I go along with, say, a planter when it's too wet, and I sort of smear, or if I go with a tillage implement at a certain depth and I break these pores, like, pores are good, but don't they need to connect?
Yeah. So it's all about water movement, right? And so if they're connected, the water will move quicker. If you disrupt it and break up at the surface, then it takes takes a long time for water to move through that. And then think about right, water, once it's from a small pore to a large pore, it doesn't move very quickly. So that's another consideration, that you need it to be saturated before it will move into a big pore. So yeah, these are awesome scans. Jodi, what I find so impressive is that compacted side is, you said it was 29 years earlier.
Yeah, this is a
Right?
study, I think out of Switzerland or Sweden. I could get the resource if you
Sure.
guys wanted it.
That's super
Yeah,
cool.
no, like that's super, like you're seeing that in the long term. Yeah. So we've
Yeah.
done some of that work. Dr. Richard Heck at the University of Guelph has been doing some of those CT, and he's also looked at microtopography. So
Oh,
kind of like the surface roughness of using the CT to kind of explain about infiltration and like if you have just crusting
yep.
to using a CT scan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
very
Super cool.
powerful tool.
Yeah, I like it. I like when we can take existing technology and find new uses for it.
Yes.
That's always a good thing. I like that. Okay, so we've got a few last things to cover. Trevor is asking if anyone's going to be at the Ottawa Farm Show this week. Trevor, Real Agriculture does not have a booth, but I will probably be there at some point on Wednesday. Anyway, you can find me there. It is spring break, which is the Ottawa Valley Farm Show here, my local farm show, which is always a lot of fun. Okay, so a few things that I want to just sort of go over here is that, obviously some sort of tillage happens, and that's fine. We know that's going to happen, but we have to think about the reason why we're doing it. Jodi, if my goal, let's say, is to add more aggregates to my soil over time, and I want to start this year, what should I do? What are a couple things that I could be doing this year that will start on the path towards preventing compaction and or increasing the aggregate stability?
Okay, so aggregates are built by roots and microbes, and tillage always takes away from that. They always break apart structure. So you want to be the least aggressive you can. Now, when you're talking about aggressiveness, the moldboard plow and the disc are the two worst ones you can have, because the moldboard plow totally inverts the soil over. So all the microbes that had oxygen now don't, and they don't survive very well down in that. And you can tell moldboard plow because the residue that will be down there when they plow again comes up and it's the same color. That means there were no microbes down there or they weren't alive anyway, to decompose that residue. The other one is a disc, because a disc tells the soil where to cut. It is very destructive to soil structure. If you watch where they build roads, they usually have a disc sitting on the side, and it's because it breaks up structure really, really well and makes a really good road bed. But that's not what we want in our field. So you want to use more, and every piece of equipment has pros and cons. Okay? But you want to use more like the shanks, and to go into the points to go into the soil goes up along the shank and kind of breaks apart more on its natural planes. It's not as destructive as a disc. So if you can switch out, let's say you have a chisel plow and it's bearing a lot of residue and it's doing a lot of mixing of the soil, you can change out those points and shanks to be thinner and not twisted. Okay? And that will help you get used to more residue out there. And, we want you to take as big as steps as you feel comfortable doing. If residue scares you, then, well, let's figure out a way to just add a little bit more, and, so that you get used to this, so that you can make sure that your equipment can handle it. And so that's what we look at. Also, I know people who do 2 fall chisel plow passes and 2 spring field cultivations. Try knocking out one of those, that you don't do it. You're saving fuel too.
Mm-hmm.
And wear and tear on your equipment and lots of
Mm-hmm.
things.
And lots of, all sorts of things, but lots of tractor snacks. So there's that. Always a plus. Okay, so we do like tractor snacks. Laura, similar question, but more in the biological realm on the cover crop side. Certainly, it is something that a lot of growers consider. For someone who is just trying to work a bit more into their system, how do you suggest they start to add some of those roots back in the shoulder seasons?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest part is if you have winter wheat in the rotation, right, after harvest, and I would definitely start with something that winter kills. So oats, pea, radish. We have on the Midwest Cover Crop Council site, there's an Ontario section, and we have resources there. There's about 4 recipes, cover crop recipes, that you can choose from based on your system. But yeah, I would start small and think about why are you doing it, planting cover crops, have a plan for planting, but also for termination and checking things the next season, right? Scouting earlier in your next crop, all of those things.
Now, before I forget, Laura,
Yeah.
Producer Jay, can you put up the ticket? Before I forget, we run out of time. The soil health analysis, the SHAP. If you are in Ontario, there we go. You have not a golden ticket, it's an orange ticket. But this is just for Ontario, so I apologize to all my Western friends. Well, Kevin's out in BC, sorry. But Laura, what does this ticket get you? Please grab that QR code. But if you're in Ontario, what is this all about?
Right. So we can cover the cost for soil health analysis. So we want to build the database for soil health in Ontario. OMAFA has a SHAP, which is the Soil Health Assessment and Planning Tool. And there's 5 indicators that OMAFA have selected. We can pay for that. We can also add on your soil texture, a standard fertility, and carbon and nitrogen in that whole package. It relies on you to take the soil sample. I mean, you know your farm the best. It's a 1-point sample in your field, but if you have multiple fields, we can cover those costs. And basically, if we're having a soil health test in Ontario, we need Ontario soil data. Right? There's really not a lot of point if we don't have Ontario data in the database. And so we can help with the cost. Yeah. So there we go. And credit to Heather White, who came up with the golden ticket. But you don't need a golden ticket. Just go to soils
just
at
go
Guelph,
to
or email soils@uoguelph.ca and let Heather know that you're interested.
Okay.
I have 2 resources really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to know more about tillage or compaction, you can go to the Upper Midwest Tillage Guide and the Upper Midwest Compaction Guide. They're both about 45 to 47 pages, but they're put in chapters and lots of photos because I don't like reading just all text. So lots of photos in there, the research that we've done, and hopefully the Upper Midwest Erosion Guide will come out this year.
Nice. Okay, so that was compaction, and what was the other one? Sorry.
Tillage Guide.
Tillage. Okay, so Tillage Guide, Compaction, Upper Midwest Tillage Guide, and Compaction Guide, and one day an Erosion Guide. All right. Okay, thank you both. We are out of time for tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us in the chat. Some fantastic questions, comments. Great to see everybody out there. And next week's show happens on Monday, which is St. Patrick's Day. So we're going with a green theme. We're going with nitrogen management next week. So be back, and everybody wear your best St. Patty's Day gear. and send me a picture of it. I will not be. I'll be honest. But anyway, maybe my guests will. You never know. All right, Jodi, Laura, thank you both so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And yes, check us out next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on The Agronomist. Thank you, everyone. Head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists to get those CEU credits. And we'll see you next week. Cheers, everybody.